Evening, I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler. Welcome to my next video. Now, my previous video, I talked about La Nina summers and the following winter temperature anomalies. So we went and I talked about that extensively about how the temperature anomalies were across the United States. Now, with this particular video, it's a continuation of the first video I just made, the most recent one. We're going to talk about La Nina summers and the following winter precipitation anomalies. I'll delve a little deeper than that even and give you the actual U.S. precip anomalies during the months of July, August, and September when La Nina onset, those conditions onset. So let's take a look at this. I did some additional research here. Bear with me on this. I apologize for such a long delay between that first video, the temperature anomalies in La Nina summers, and then this one. But I've had an interesting time, pretty good little cold going on. So, just trying to get through that and be able to speak here on the channel. So let's get right to this research. All right, so again, I consider the past La Nina summers to be that time period of July, August, and September. Now, this is the time period at which La Nina conditions first came on. My laser pointer out here. All right, so I decided to look at these La Nina summers when La Nina started in the months of July, August, and September. And now I'm going to take a look at the following winter precip anomalies across the U.S. Again, I will also, as a bonus, show you July, August, and September precip anomalies in the U.S. So I examined summers when La Nina conditions came on during the months of July, August, September, going back to the year 1980. So what are we looking at here? 44 years of data. Now keep in mind that the latest forecast from the Climate Prediction Center is showing La Nina coming on. I believe it's a 70% chance of La Nina starting. That transition from ENSO neutral to La Nina kicking in August. There's a 70% probability in August of La Nina conditions occurring. And I know there's a La Nina watch issued as well. So we are expecting similar La Nina conditions to develop this summer, late in the summer. All right, so we did have the weak and moderate La Nina strengths were noted. Very similar to my previous video where I showed you past La Ninas and the temperature anomalies. These are all the same La Nina years that I looked at, okay? So nothing's changed here from my previous video. I go back all the way to 1980 with the data set, but the first late summer La Nina period occurred in 1985, so that's why you don't see anything before 85. And I went all the way out to the year 2022 with this data. Now, one other note I make here, here's the La Nina strength categories down here again. Just kind of getting you acquainted with, what's considered a weak La Nina, moderate La Nina, strong La Nina. All right, in order for La Nina to occur, these water temperatures in the eastern and central equatorial Pacific in that Nino 3.4 region must be at least 0.5 degrees Celsius below normal to be considered La Nina. Got to be at least 0.5 degrees Celsius below normal. All right, so now I want to let you know, going back to 1985, I had to utilize a couple different data sets for the precip anomalies. The colors are the same regardless. Starting out with the older data back to 85 and moving forward a bit, you'll notice these type of products, these particular charts. Now this data source is IRI, the IRI, and also you see the scales here on the bottom of each of these graphics. So green means above normal. The darker the green means more extensively above normal. All right, brown means below normal on all of these. So green above, brown below. The darker the shading, the more dry or wet the conditions were. All right, so we're using IRI data, precip anomalies data. By the way, this is also in millimeters. And basically we're doing precip anomalies in the units of millimeters, not inches. So just bear with me on that. I want to explain that. Now this is July of 1985 on the left. You see how wet conditions were from the mid-Atlantic down to the Gulf Coast. I want to make mention of this. Some of these late summer precip anomalies where you see the green and it's wetter than normal, a lot of that could be due to tropical cyclones coming into the region, okay? We're talking about September being peak of hurricane season in the Atlantic Ocean. And so some of these in the southeast up to the mid-Atlantic here in July of 85, I'd have to look back at the data for the hurricane data, but some of this late summer and early fall type above normal anomalies are due to tropical systems. All right, but let's take a look at things here. So this is July of 85, above normal mid-Atlantic down to Florida, down to the Gulf of Mexico. Drier than normal across the Midwest. Whenever you see the white coloring on here, by the way, that indicates near normal precip or near average precip. Right, so the West Coast is pretty much near normal or near average precip in July of 85. In the middle here is August of 1985. The same areas are wetter than normal from the mid-Atlantic to the Florida Peninsula. And then we also have an additional area that's above normal in precip, and that's across the Midwestern U.S., Illinois, right on down through western Kentucky, Tennessee, and westward to Iowa and northern Missouri. We had below normal precip across the Intermountain West, the Rocky Mountain area. And then we had below normal across southeastern Texas and the western Gulf of Mexico in August of 85. Over here on the right is September 85. We've seen now that the mid-Atlantic is dried out, has below normal precip going on. So it was a drier than normal September of 85. Mid-Atlantic area up to Pennsylvania into Ohio, southward down to Georgia. We had a lot of above normal precip in the green shading here across parts of the upper Midwest, extending southwestward into the central U.S., and then also above normal precip anomalies across parts of the Pacific Northwest. Let's now take a look at the following winter. What were the precip anomalies in the U.S. in the following winter? Winter 85-86, so I have December 85 here on the far left. We had a drier than normal December across much of the eastern U.S., also drier than normal across the Pacific Northwest. In fact, you look at the entire U.S. in December of 1985, and you really don't see any green coloring on there, do you? Either normal across the upper Midwest and the northern plains, in this white coloring, near normal or near average precip in the white, or below normal for a large area of the U.S. in December of 85. In January 86 here in the center, things remained rather drier than normal across the southeastern U.S., and then we had above normal precip across Seattle, some of the coastal areas of the Pacific Northwest. But overall, a fairly dry January of 86 across much of the United States. And then over here on the far right, February of 86, we see a lot more above normal precip anomalies across the western U.S. along the west coast, specifically southern Oregon and northern California. So this tells me there was probably a lot of storm systems coming in off the Pacific in February of 86. A lot more above normal here in February 86 along the west coast. We did see slightly above normal precip across the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. And we had a below normal area of precip, drier than normal conditions across Mississippi down to Louisiana. Now let's move ahead to July, August, September 1988 precip anomalies for the U.S. This was a moderate La Nina. Again, this data set is from IRI, and the precip anomalies are in millimeters per month. All right, so here is July of 88 on the far left. Notice how dry conditions were across Iowa, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. Wetter than normal across parts of southwestern Texas, and then parts of the Mississippi River Valley from Memphis south towards generally in the southern Mississippi area, Hattiesburg included. And then we had drier than normal conditions right along the coastal sections of Georgia and South Carolina. Above normal readings along the New England coastline back in July of 88. August of 88 in the center, showing below normal or drier than normal conditions across parts of Nebraska southward down through Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas. We saw above normal precip. This could be affiliated over here with some of the southwestern monsoon rains coming in off of that warm, moist air coming in off the Gulf of Mexico. So you see the desert southwest area in August of 88 was above normal in this green shading for precip. And then was wetter than normal across southeastern Canada as well. Near normal or near average precip in the white coloring here from the mid-Atlantic northward towards southern New York State. A little wetter than normal across Maine and northern New England. September 88 here on the far right, showing above normal precip, wetter than normal conditions across the southeastern U.S., and also wetter than normal across the southern plains, northern Texas and new western Oklahoma. Drier than normal conditions existed in September 88 right there in New England, a large stretch in New England stretching down to coastal Virginia. What was the following winter precip anomalies looking like? December 88 here on the left. December 88, look how dry conditions were up and down the entire East Coast. In fact, look at the United States as a whole. Drier than normal conditions along the Pacific Northwest, but there was really no above normal precip for December 88. And this is quite a common feature during, specifically for the East Coast, this is very common during La Nina winters. January of 89 in the center, showing very, very dry conditions across California in January of 89. And this is their wet season. So it wasn't a very wet winter across California, which is very key to replenishing this, the water levels through that Sierra Nevada snowpack. So very dry conditions across a large swath of the eastern Pacific, actually, in January of 89. And then look at this over here, East Coast remaining dry in January of 89. Just a couple areas of above normal or wetter than normal conditions, including you in Memphis, and then you in Houston. Over here on the right is precip anomalies for February of 89. Notice now how we have a much wetter area across the portions of Tennessee and Kentucky stretching east to the North Carolina coastline. Very much below normal again along the U.S. West Coast for February of 89. So a very dry winter in the West Coast of 89, West Coast during the winter of 88-89. Let's take a look now at July, August, September 95 precip anomalies. This was a weak La Nina. Conditions came on during this time period, these months. Over here in July 95, notice how dry conditions were across the eastern U.S., specifically portions of Kentucky southward to Tennessee. And conditions were also drier than normal in the central U.S., Nebraska, southwestward to the desert southwest as well. Not much of a monsoon moisture type situation in July of 95 across the desert southwest. Looking at the center here, August of 1995, we had wetter than normal conditions across parts of Wisconsin into Minnesota. We had wetter than normal conditions from the Carolinas southward down to northern Florida. We had drier than normal conditions, though, for mainly the major cities of the Northeast, from Philly to New York City to Boston. And then over here on the right, we're showing September of 95 during weak La Nina conditions. We had a drier than normal situation. Midwest, Illinois, all the way to the East Coast, Virginia, northward to Pennsylvania. And we had very dry conditions in the northern Gulf of Mexico, too. Look at this brown shading here. So very dry conditions. We're talking 100 to 200% below normal. And, the normal conditions really were over the western Atlantic Ocean. Again, that could be associated with a tropical system potentially recurving out here. Overall, the western U.S. in September 95 was near normal as far as precip. Following winter 95-96, here's December 95. You noticing the theme here? Drier than normal in the eastern U.S. in December. See this again? December 95 was no exception. Look at this, December 88, during La Nina, drier than normal. Look at this, December 85, East Coast, drier than normal. So you're getting this hint that Decembers tend to be drier than normal along the East Coast, at least the data we looked at so far. Now we look at January right here of 96. Conditions got much more wet along the U.S. West Coast. And then look at the East Coast too. Conditions were wet as well. So this would be in January of 96. So if I recall correctly, I believe this was a very big nor'easter type month where there was a lot of coastal storms up the East Coast. And that resulted in, 50 to, 25 to 50% above normal precip values. We also saw above normal readings across the upper Midwest. And then if you were down in the Texas Gulf Coast, Louisiana Gulf Coast, it was drier than normal back in January of 96. And then over here in February of 96 on the right, notice how below normal the brown shading, lower Mississippi Valley. I mean, my goodness, 50% below normal for the precip anomalies. And it remained wet in the West Coast. I mean, look at this, winter 95-96, December 95, wetter than normal West Coast, January of 96, wetter than normal West Coast, and February 96, wetter than normal West Coast. And the East only got wet in the month of January that winter. Moving on to July, August, September 1998. This was during a moderate La Nina conditions. And this is July of 98 over here on the left, showing drier than normal conditions in July from Virginia northward, parts of Delaware, New Jersey, coastal southern New England there, Massachusetts. We saw wetter than normal conditions across the central U.S., Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri back in July of 98. We saw below normal precip or drier than normal conditions across the Texas Gulf Coast again. Right along Interstate 10 here from Louisiana into Texas, including you in Beaumont, Port Arthur, Houston, northward actually, even into the Dallas area. We saw drier than normal conditions again right along the East Coast. Over here in the center is August of 98, showing drier than normal conditions across the southeastern U.S., drier than normal across the southern plains, Oklahoma and Kansas, near normal precip across a lot of the western U.S., slightly drier than normal across the Pacific Northwest. And finally, September 98 on the right. Wow, what happened over here? Look how much above normal this precip is along the Gulf Coast. Again, this could very well be due to hurricane activity. Perhaps one or two landfalling tropical systems really put a lot of rain down in September of 98 across the Gulf Coast. You see the drier than normal condition zone north of that, from Tennessee into Kentucky, into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and along the Virginia area. Even up towards New England, it was drier than normal in September of 98. Looking ahead now at the winter that followed, December of 98. Okay, well, we have a little area of above normal precip for the mid-Atlantic, coastal mid-Atlantic, southeastern Virginia down through the coastal North Carolina area, but it's not a large area, right? We have drier than normal conditions through the major metropolitan areas of the Northeast, Philly, again, New York City, Boston, on north up to portions of Maine, well below normal and drier than normal in December of 98. We saw some drier than normal conditions across California as well. And just north of that, ironically, we had some above normal precip from coastal portions of Oregon, northward, Interstate 5 to Seattle, and then even up towards British Columbia. Here is January of 99, the precip anomalies in the center. Look how wet it was across the lower Mississippi Valley in January of 99. Those of you living in Mississippi, into western Tennessee, Memphis, Jackson, Tennessee, as well as portions of southern Illinois, Paducah, Kentucky, you were above normal for precip back in January of 99, and all the way up to New England, actually. Mid-Atlantic, you're included in this. So it was a wetter than normal January during the La Nina situation in January of 99. Drier than normal conditions across the desert Southwest. And then finally, over here on the right, this is February of 99, showing well above normal precip, wetter than normal conditions. Again, Oregon and Washington up through western Canada. I mean, this is an interesting signature, isn't it? How wet or above normal the rainfall patterns are during La Nina across the western U.S. here. This right here would indicate to me there was some sort of trough. An upper level trough on the main storm track just kept coming into the same area here. But look at this in February of 99. Look how dry it was along the Gulf Coast. Look at this deeper brown shading for those of you living in Mississippi. And really from Memphis points south, Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, and even working its way west towards eastern Texas again. And those of you in Louisiana, New Orleans was below normal as well. Moving ahead now to July, August, September 99, precip anomalies. This was a moderate La Nina. You see July here on the left. This is July of 99. Look how dry conditions were anywhere east of the Rocky Mountains, really, with the exception of the upper Midwest up towards northern Wisconsin and into Minnesota. It was wetter than normal. But other than that, it was a drier than normal July of 99. Look at Florida even. So, I mean, this really tells me one thing. We really didn't have many tropical systems making landfall in July of 99, anywhere from Florida northward, all the way up to Jersey. You just see the brown shading. So not a lot of tropical activity, like producing a lot of copious rainfall. Over here in the center is August of 99, showing drier than normal conditions along the Gulf Coast. Look at this. The same areas are below normal again in precip for the second consecutive month, July and August of 99, below normal for the deep south. Near normal conditions for a large swath of the western U.S., even drier than normal conditions extended north towards New England. And then finally over here on the right is September of 99. Same area is drier than normal. This is crazy. You see how below normal conditions are from the panhandle of Florida northward through Mississippi and Alabama, Tennessee, all the way north towards Indiana. And even parts of Wisconsin and into Minnesota were well below normal for precip back in September of 99. And then you see this crazy wetter than normal area right next to it. See this wetter than normal area for coastal North Carolina northward into eastern Virginia? That was the bullseye of above normal precip back in September 99. Now, I do remember 99 well because we did have Hurricane Floyd. Hurricane Floyd was a massive tropical cyclone, and it just paralleled Florida and it paralleled up here towards Outer Banks. But I do know that there was some more activity as far as the tropics go, and that might explain this wetter than normal anomaly in the Mid-Atlantic back in September 99. Now, what happened after that? All right, the following winter of 1999-2000. Remember this? Everybody was freaking out, thinking, Y2K was going to happen. I remember this well. I mean, December 99, I went back to visit, I went back to the Midwest, and everybody was freaking out about Y2K at the time. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. We'll keep moving forward with what the precip anomalies look like. So this is December 99 on the left, okay? Look how dry much of the U.S. is in December of 99. I mean, only one pocket of above normal precip, which is across western Tennessee into parts of Missouri. Other than that, the West Coast was extremely dry in December 99, so there was a lack of storms coming into California again. And there was also drier than normal across the southeastern U.S. Look at the western Atlantic, how dry it was. And also you in Boston, working your way up towards Vermont, New Hampshire, New Jersey. I mean, my gosh, New York City. Nobody was getting much in the way of any precip in December of 99. Now you notice how these graphics change, right? These graphics now, starting with January of 2000 here in the center, that's courtesy of NOAA. The NOAA data set for these precip anomalies only went back to this period, to the year 2000. And so that's why I had to use a lot of the IRI graphics to show you the wetter and drier than normal areas. So let's go to January 2000. We survived Y2K. It's basically another century here, right? And what happened in January of 2000? We had below normal precip across southern Arizona, southern Nevada, into Southern California. I mean, look at the Interstate 10 corridor here in January of 2000. Very dry. And by the way, this is percentage of a precip. Again, these graphics, brown is below normal. The darker the brown, the more dry the conditions. And then the green is above normal, okay? All right, so a lot of dryness into New Mexico, Arizona, as well as Southern California, Southern Nevada. We had dry area in January of 2000, below normal precip, and in eastern Texas, Louisiana, almost the entire state of Louisiana, portions of Arkansas into western Tennessee. We had another area below normal in the Midwest and up in the northern plains, and we had below normal also across parts of Pennsylvania southward to western Virginia and the state of West Virginia. Below normal also for you in Florida. Now you do notice there's a little bit of above normal precip in January 2000 along the Mid-Atlantic coast from southern Virginia all the way down along the coastal Carolina area. We also had above normal precip across portions of Oregon, northern Nevada, Idaho, and northern and central California. Over here on the right is the precip anomalies for, this would be February of 2000. Look how wet the western U.S. was in this particular point in time. Much wetter than normal across California, Nevada, Oregon, parts of eastern Washington, Idaho. Also well above normal in precip across North Dakota in February of 2000. And then we had above normal precip as well across the Ohio River for those of you living in Cincinnati, for example. And we had very dry conditions again over the desert Southwest, portions of northern Texas. The entire state of New Mexico is below normal or drier than normal, and then southern Arizona drier than normal. And look at the Gulf Coast down to Florida, drier than normal. Mid-Atlantic, drier than normal. Now let's move ahead to July, August, September 2000 precip anomalies. This is when we had a weak La Nina. But look how dry the western U.S. was in July of 2000. Very dry conditions, specifically for California and Nevada. Also Texas, you were really hurting for some rainfall in July of 2000. And expanded east, the dry area to Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, into Georgia. Tennessee, you're not left out of this either. And it was drier than normal up in Pennsylvania into western New York State. Over here in the center is August of 2000. Look at this dry area across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Southwest Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana. Look at this area here, expansive. In August of 2000, that tells me most likely we had a large heat dome, an upper level ridge parked over this area for a considerable amount of time during the month of August 2000. Underneath that ridge, we have sinking air and very hot temperatures. Over here in the Pacific Northwest, also drier than normal conditions in August 2000. Wetter than normal conditions across Nevada into Southern California, into parts of Arizona. This may be associated with some of the monsoonal moisture. And by the way, some of this above normal precip in Southern California, you say to yourself, wait a minute, it's rainy season in Southern California in the winter, not in late summer in August. Well, there's a good possibility there may have been a tropical system paralleling the Baja Peninsula here, and it might have brought some tropical moisture into Southern California in this case. They do get some tropical moisture from tropical systems if they go far enough here, paralleling the Baja area. Look how dry conditions were. I just can't get over this. Over here on the right, September 2000, look how above normal precip was across northern Florida, Georgia, into South Carolina and parts of North Carolina, above normal precip. We also have above normal precip, pretty significantly above normal, across southeastern Washington, eastern Oregon, working our way southwestward into Northern California, above normal precip. We saw below normal precip again over parts of northern and western Texas and the same areas here. I mean, Arizona, New Mexico again, drier than normal conditions. What happened the following winter? 2000, 2001 precip anomalies in the winter. December 2000 here on the left. Look how dry the winter got off. What kind of dry start the winter got off to here. In parts of California, working our way southward towards southern Arizona. Very dry conditions for December of 2000. Drier than normal also across parts of central Nebraska into western Kansas, into parts of the Texas Panhandle here. Drier than normal conditions expanded eastward towards Missouri and southern Illinois, and we have a drier area here, drier than normal area across the mid-Atlantic, also in Florida, parts of Louisiana and South Mississippi, as well as parts of western PA. All right, January of 2001 here in the center, drier than normal conditions in the Pacific Northwest, as well as for you in Montana and North Dakota, drier than normal conditions as well for parts of the Ohio River Valley here, southern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Look at all of Indiana and Ohio is really below normal, drier than normal, and then Michigan, you got in on this, as well as drier than normal conditions up to New England and from the mid-Atlantic southward to Florida. We saw wetter than normal conditions right in the center of the country in January of 2001, from eastern Colorado, western Kansas, northeastward towards pretty much all of Nebraska and parts of southeastern South Dakota and southern Minnesota. And then finally over here on the right, precip anomalies for, this would be February of 2001. Look how above normal precip was across the Midwest. You really got a lot of precip, specifically across eastern and north central Kansas, as well as Oklahoma, parts of northern Texas, including you in Dallas, parts of western Tennessee as well, well above normal precip. Then we had drier than normal conditions. This is very odd in a La Nina to see these drier than normal conditions over the Pacific Northwest, but that's exactly what we had. We did have drier than normal conditions along the east coast in general, but very, very dry across southern Georgia, Florida Panhandle, southeastern Alabama, and then down to the Florida Peninsula. What about July, August, September 2007 precip anomalies? Now we had weak La Nina conditions setting in at this point. So July of 2007 here on the left, look how wet, or how wet it was in July of 2007, from Seattle right along the Pacific Coast Highway, all the way down to Northern California. I mean, it was well above normal precip. We had drier than normal conditions in Southern California and parts of those rain shadow areas east of the Cascades, for example, in Washington State, drier than normal. Drier than normal in Montana, parts of western North Dakota, pretty much all of South Dakota, as well as much of Minnesota. Drier than normal conditions across southern Iowa into northern Missouri, into western Kentucky and Tennessee, and then drier than normal conditions across the mid-Atlantic, specifically southeastern Virginia, pretty much the entire state of Virginia for that matter, as well as the Carolinas. Here is August of 2007 in the center, Look how above normal the precip was. Very wet conditions across southern Wisconsin, southern Minnesota, Iowa, northern Illinois, northern Indiana, into northwestern Ohio. Very above normal as far as precip goes, much above normal in August of '07. And then beneath that, in the southeastern U.S. and mid-Atlantic, you had drier than normal conditions. And then finally, over here on the right, September 2007, wetter than normal conditions across parts of central and southern California. Also wetter than normal conditions across parts of the desert southwest into southern Nevada. And then we had well below normal precip, drier than normal conditions from Boston southwestward, New York City, Newark, New Jersey, you're drier than normal. All the way south, Delaware, all right? All the way down into coastal eastern Virginia and eastern North Carolina and South Carolina, drier than normal conditions, drier than normal for you in the Midwest. Lower portion of Michigan, southwestward toward northern Illinois and central Illinois, down to northeastern Missouri. Winter that followed, 2007, 2008, look how wet December was in '07. Across a large swath of the country from Nevada all the way east to southern Wisconsin, southeastern Iowa, much of the state of Kansas, also much of the state of Nebraska and Idaho. I mean, look at this. For those of you in Colorado, well above normal precip. And then you had above normal precip extending towards western portions of New England, the Ohio River Valley. You had another swath of above normal precip there in interior portions of the southeastern U.S. But look at the dry areas here. Texas, you're dry, as well as parts of central, western North Dakota, as well as much of Montana was below normal. And then to January of 2008, look how these wet areas in December of '07 were replaced by these very dry areas across Nebraska in January of '08. It did a complete flip. In those drier areas that were once well above normal the month previous, in December, are now well below normal. Look at Texas. Most of you are below normal. Very dry conditions in January of 2008. And then it's only wet right here on the immediate Gulf Coast from Corpus Christi, working our way northward toward Galveston and Houston, right along the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, New Orleans, Biloxi, Mississippi were slightly above normal in January 2008 for precip. And there's that theme again. Look at this. The mid-Atlantic is drier than normal. Virginia northeastward, drier than normal. Look how dry or below normal the precip was in January '08 across Minnesota, parts of northwestern Wisconsin, parts of, look at the Dakotas. I mean, Nebraska, Texas, all below normal. And over here on the right is the precip anomalies for February of 2008. Look at all the above normal precip that occurred that month. Generally, Interstate 44, we work our way from Oklahoma City northeastward. All right, look at eastern Kansas, Olathe, Kansas, you're in there. Look at the St. Louis, you're in there. Springfield, Missouri, you're above normal. As well as all of the state of Illinois, Springfield, Peoria, it doesn't matter, Rockford, Chicago. And then lower Michigan, southern Wisconsin. Look how above normal the precip was here in New England. I mean, this was some significant precip anomalies. Very wet conditions across interior Massachusetts, all the way down towards portions of New York City, and then also along the coast up to Maine. What about July, August, September 2010 precip anomalies? We had a moderate La Nina come on during this time period. Here's July of 2010 here on the left, showing, look how below normal. Can you believe this? I mean, this is phenomenal. Very below normal on the U.S. West Coast in July of 2010. You see above normal for once in Texas. Hallelujah to this. You see much wetter conditions across Texas, which we haven't been able to say a whole lot of examining this data. And then you see above normal precip across Wisconsin, as well as Iowa into southeastern South Dakota. The drier than normal conditions generally scattered about the mid-Atlantic, Virginia. Again, you're drier than normal in July of 2010, and then also parts of the southeast down to Florida. By the time we get to August 2010 here in the center, the drier than normal conditions occurred basically along the whole coast of California. And then you had drier than normal conditions across Nevada. And then Texas, unfortunately, you went back to drier than normal conditions in August of 2010, extending northeastward towards southern Missouri, even including parts of southern Indiana and Illinois. Some patches of below normal precip across Maine, as well as interior New England, parts of southern Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, including you, Philly, and then also working our way southward. Finally, September 2010 here on the right. Look how below normal the precip is. Nevada, central and southern California, not much coming from the sky except sunshine. And then you very below normal precip across Utah and also portions of western Arizona. Another area of below normal precip was the Gulf Coast, working our way northeastward towards Ohio and Indiana, western Tennessee, Arkansas, you're in there. Above normal precip along the immediate mid-Atlantic coast. That's interesting, September 2010. Again, I would be curious to see what the tropics look like for this month, like how many tropical systems were kind of right around the east coast here, because this is above normal precip for coastal Virginia down to the Outer Banks. And then over here, you see above normal precip as well in September 2010 across Upper Peninsula, Michigan, northern Wisconsin, all of Minnesota. You see above normal precip in Missouri. You see above normal precip in northeastern Texas. And you see above normal precip across the northern U.S. Another very big area of precip anomalies, well above normal, was eastern Washington and eastern Oregon. How about the winter that followed, 2010-2011? December of 2010, you can clearly see where the most of the precip fell. Southern California, southern Nevada, into western Utah, as well as up into southern Minnesota and the eastern Dakotas, working our way westward towards northwestern North Dakota and into Montana. And then very dry conditions across Texas, Nebraska, southern Iowa, Missouri, Kansas. Look at this. Those of you in Louisiana, Arkansas, southeastern Missouri, the Ohio River area here, Indiana, Ohio, lower Michigan, up the East Coast again, slightly drier than normal conditions for the Carolinas down to Florida in December 2010. Now, January 2011, we saw a little bit of a flip here as far as, December 2010 was very wet in Southern California. Now look at it in January 2011, it completely flipped. Southern Arizona, very dry. Southern New Mexico, very dry. El Paso, very dry. West Texas, very dry in January 2011. Very dry up and down the East Coast. Not much in the way of precip going on. Below normal precip. And then you had up here in the Montana area and parts of the Dakotas and Nebraska was the only other area that was above normal in January of 2011. February 2011, we see drier than normal conditions across eastern North Dakota, right on through northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the UP and Michigan. We see dry conditions across Virginia, extending southwestward towards Mississippi, southern Arkansas, Louisiana. Texas, unfortunately, is dry again in February 2011, all the way along Interstate 10 through southern Arizona and southern New Mexico here. And we had wetter than normal conditions generally across portions of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, into northwestern Pennsylvania and western New York State. This tells me that the storm track is probably something like this, generally extended from southern Missouri right up, move northeastward in southern Indiana, Ohio, and work its way to New England. This is what the storm track looks like to me, based on these precip anomalies in February 2011. Now let's move. Now I'm going to start showing you some data from, I'm going to start throwing some snowfall totals in here too now. I was able to get some data from NOAA going back to the 2010-2011 winter season. Now this is total snowfall, and these were the dates. Each of these total snowfall U.S. maps I show you from this point forward is from 30 September to 14 May. That's the period at which the snow fell. All right, so here's the winter 2010-2011 total snowfall. All right, you can clearly see the legend here in the bottom right. Now these, it's generally in inches up to about 1 foot. And then it does 1 foot increments, and then it eventually does 5 foot increments. But anytime you see white on these maps, that means there was no snow that fell, no measurable snow for that winter. Makes sense. Florida, southern Louisiana, southern Texas, southern Arizona, and California. That makes perfect sense for the winter. A lot of these purple colorings where we're measuring snow in feet, that's associated with higher elevations. Okay. So at least these maps will give you an idea of kind of where the snow, how much fell for the winter, and where it really fell. So you can really see it here in New England in the winter of 2010-2011. I mean, you're seeing 4 to 6 feet of snow in a lot of areas here. So this is a pretty healthy winter based on the color scheme we're looking at. And even these lighter orange pockets like in central PA, we're talking 2 to 3 feet of snow for the winter. Okay, so that was the 2010-2011 snowfall totals. Now let's move on to July, August, September 2011. And I did not change this, and I apologize. This should be mean precip anomalies, not temp. So I just missed that one. But this was a weak La Nina. These are precip anomalies. Here's July of 2011, showing below normal precip across Texas up to Oklahoma into Kansas. You see some scattered areas of below normal precip in the southeast U.S. Above normal precip right along the coast of Washington, Oregon. Here in the center is August of 2011, very dry across the western U.S. at this point, outside of some of these areas here into Southern California, into Southern Nevada. Very dry along the Gulf Coast in August of 2011 as well. Look at this brown shading, Texas east, all the way over to Jacksonville, Florida. And then look at the east coast here from the eastern North Carolina northward, eastern Virginia, okay, up towards D.C., Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Philly. I mean, look at this. This is a healthy little swath of above normal precip all the way up to Maine. Again, that tells me maybe we had some tropical activity up and down the East Coast, a little increase in frequency of tropical cyclone activity for August of 2011. Over here on the right is September 2011, still remaining above normal in some of these interior New England cities. Southeastern New York State, Eastern PA, you're above normal in September 2011 for precip. Look at this. Expanded westward, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Northern Alabama, much of Mississippi above normal. New Orleans, you were above normal in September 2011 for precip. And again, this could be an association with a landfalling Gulf of Mexico tropical system. And a lot of times these tropical systems will come in, make landfall, really deluge, a lot of inundation of rain, heavy rain in the Gulf Coast initially, where it comes in, and then that moisture just streams northeastward. So here's the following winter, 2011-2012 precip anomalies. Look at this on the left. December 2011, much drier than normal conditions across California and Nevada, as well as the Pacific Northwest. It was drier than normal, Montana, as well as the Dakotas and Minnesota. But then we had above normal precip from the desert Southwest in December of 2011, extending northeastward towards eastern Iowa, northwestern Missouri, eastern Kansas. Then we had a drier than normal December from southeastern Virginia, the coastal areas there, all the way down coastal sections of the Carolinas and Georgia, all the way down to Florida, drier than normal in December 2011. January 2012 here in the center, very dry across southern Iowa, into Illinois, much of Missouri, pretty much all of Kansas, all of Nebraska except for the northwestern portion, as well as parts of the Texas Panhandle, very dry across Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, very dry. We did see above normal precip across North Texas back in January of 2012. We saw drier than normal conditions up and down the East Coast, again, slightly drier than normal in the Virginia area, as well as the Delmarva in New Jersey. Much more drier than normal from coastal South Carolina and Georgia down to Florida. You did not do very well for precip in Florida in the month of January 2012. And then here on the right, February 2012, very dry along California, the coast there. Not much rain. It doesn't appear it was much of a rainy winter for you in California and the Pacific side there. We did see above normal precip in the green shading here across southern Minnesota into southeastern South Dakota, as well as that's Nebraska, Kansas. We see above normal precip across portions of Louisiana and into Texas, southern Texas and central Texas. Drier than normal conditions of New England for February 2012. Here's the winter 2011-2012 total snowfall. Again, the snow that fell from 30 September to 14 May. You notice this white coloring here where no snow fell. It's a little bit further to the north. The southeastern U.S. Didn't get much in the way of wintry weather this winter, the 2011-12 winter season. We do see some higher snowfall totals into Maine, as well as into Vermont, New Hampshire, New York State, some of the Great Lake, the snow belts there in the Great Lakes there in Erie, off Lake Erie in Ontario. You see some purple coloring indicating 10 feet of snow in some of these scattered areas downwind of these lake effect snow belts. But in general, I mean, look where the blue extends up to now. So this blue line here that generally is indicative of up to It's 6 inches to a foot of snow in the blue. Okay, so 6 to 12 inches is blue. 1 to 2 feet is a slight yellow. So you can see there's a major gradient here. I mean, there's a large area covered, but it's not like a super large amount of snow here. There's your mountainous snow again. There's your Sierra Nevada snow. There's some of the higher terrain of the Pacific Northwest. There's the Rockies, the purple shading. But you do see that there was less snow further south, up into the Carolinas, for example. Now let's move ahead to July, August, September of 2016. This is a week La Nina. July of 2016 on the left, showing drier than normal conditions in California, Nevada, drier than normal along the Florida area, as well as Georgia. Drier than normal up into western portions of New York State. Meanwhile, we had wetter than normal conditions across parts of western Kentucky, into Illinois and Missouri, parts of Minnesota, parts of Montana, parts of the Pacific Northwest. Center here is August 2016, showing well below normal precip, drier than normal across the western U.S., wetter than normal across Louisiana, and much of Texas was above normal precip. Also wetter than normal in the Midwest. Drier than normal up and down the East Coast, specifically the coastal areas from the Carolinas, Virginia, northward towards Jersey and New York, Long Island there, and Eastern Mass. And then over here on the right is September 2016, drier than normal conditions from southern Oregon southward towards northern, central, even getting down towards LA into Southern California, drier than normal in September 16. And then drier than normal across a large chunk of the southeastern U.S. You will notice some above normal precip or wetter than normal conditions across coastal Virginia into parts of coastal Carolinas, as well as North Dakota, Montana was above normal in precip, Idaho, parts of Wyoming as well. Here's the following winter, December 2016 anomalies here on the left, showing a swath of drier than normal conditions across the southern plains, Oklahoma, northeastward to Missouri and Illinois. We saw below normal precip into Florida in December of 2016. Slightly below normal precip across the coastal areas of Virginia, northeastward up to Boston. And then you see drier than normal conditions across Washington State. We saw above normal precip across southwestern Texas. We saw above normal precip in December 2016 over the upper Midwest, northern plains, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. We saw wetter than normal conditions across a large portion of Southern California. January 2017 in the center, boy, California really got wet, didn't it? Very much above normal in January 2017 in California, Nevada, southern Idaho, Utah, and Colorado, as well as portions of Oklahoma, western Oklahoma into Kansas, portions of New Mexico, another area of above normal precip from the Gulf Coast, Mobile, and Biloxi northeastward towards Atlanta. And then over here on the right is February 2017. Look how dry it was across Nebraska, southern Nebraska anyway, Kansas, right on down towards northwestern Oklahoma. Very dry for Missouri, Illinois in February 2017. And then also on the East Coast, really, from Pennsylvania southward to Florida, drier than normal conditions. You see wetter than normal conditions across the Pacific Northwest, as well as much of the state of California, specifically northern and central California was above normal in February 2017. Here's the snow total for that season, winter 2016-17. You do notice there was some storms across the mid-Atlantic. We're talking that dark blue is around 6 inches of snow for the winter season. And you do see there are some pretty good snow totals here across northern New England as well in the purple shading. We're talking that purple coloring there, that light purple is up to 10 feet of snow for the winter. And then you saw some snow across the northern U.S. as well. But like nothing really majorly overwhelming. Here's July, August, September 2020. These are the precip anomalies. This is during a week La Nina. July of 2020, very dry western U.S., and above normal or wetter than normal central U.S., Nebraska and Kansas, Missouri, southern Illinois, above normal precip. Over here in the center is August of 2020. Look how dry the whole western U.S. was in August of 2020. That expanded east to Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. It's drier than normal as well from Boston northward up to Portland, Maine. And then over here on the right, September 2020, the beat goes on here in the desert southwest area here, or really the western U.S. California, you're just dry. This was a dry period for you, which it's not uncommon for this time of year because, you just don't, it's not the rainy season. rainy season being in the winter for Southern California specifically. It was wetter than normal in September 2020 for much of the state of Texas, northern and central portions specifically, as well as southern Oklahoma, as well as Arkansas. There was a little patch of above normal precip in eastern Iowa and northwestern Illinois, and then it was well above normal across parts of the Florida Panhandle. Panama City, my goodness, you had the umbrella out a lot that month. Some above normal precip as well up into coastal Virginia, and then also below normal precip into Maine, September 2020. Here's the following winter, December 2020 on the left, showing well below normal precip, drier than normal conditions in the desert southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, into California, drier than normal. Much of the northwestern U.S. was also below normal. Montana, you were really below normal, specifically eastern Montana and the western portion of the Dakotas. Below normal precip across parts of Wisconsin, pretty much the entire state. And drier than normal along the Ohio River. And then over here in the center is, this would be January of 2021. You had a little bit of area of above normal precip across the central U.S., southeastern Kansas into up towards Omaha, and parts of Kansas City, western Missouri. Had a little stripe of above normal precip in January 2021 from coastal North Carolina down to South Carolina and into the inland portions of Georgia. Well below normal precip for Florida in January 2021. And over here on the right, look how much above normal in February 2021 the precip was along the East Coast. Things really changed in February 21. It remains very dry across Southern California in February 2021, and very dry across the upper Midwest and Northern Plains, as well as very dry across Missouri into, this is Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas. Here's the winter snowfall totals 2021. You see there were some pretty good storms. I mean, there was still some snow in the mid-Atlantic and in Virginia. And much of the heaviest snow, this is a lot of the higher terrain and the snow belt areas again in New York State, getting the purple coloring here, 10 feet of snow. Maine got a pretty good amount of snow that winter, but you kind of see where, again, down here along the southeastern U.S., if you lived in South Carolina, for, let's say, didn't get a lot in the way of snow. The inland portions got a little bit, but in general, this was the snow map for that winter. Here is July, August, September 2021 precip anomalies. This is a week La Nina. Here's July 2021 on the left. Very dry across the Pacific Northwest in July of 2021, as well as parts of the northern U.S. Those of you living along Interstate 94 could definitely attest to this, as well as northern Minnesota. It was wetter than normal across the desert southwest into portions of Arizona, as well as into central and southern Texas. It was above normal as far as precip. It was also wetter than normal along the coastal sections of New England. And here is August of 2021 in the center. Look how dry, that deep brown across the west coast of the United States. And so in August of 2021, it was wetter than normal across parts of the Tennessee Valley. And then over here on the right is September 2021. So you see how dry conditions were across parts of western North Dakota into Montana, down into eastern Idaho, Nevada, into parts of Utah and California again. In September 2021, it was wetter than normal along the Pacific Northwest area, Washington, Oregon. It was also drier than normal for many of you in Texas, as well as those of you in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, Iowa, that area, as well as west to Omaha there. Drier than normal, coastal Virginia down to the coastal North Carolina area. And it was wetter than normal in September 2021. Eastern Pennsylvania, New York City, you were wetter than normal up to Boston and up to Maine. Here's the winter that followed precip anomalies. December of 2021 here on the left. It was a wetter than normal month for those of you living from San Francisco southward down to Southern California, as well as parts of Nevada well above normal. Well above normal as well across northern and central Minnesota. And then it was well below normal precip from the central Nebraska area southward towards western and northwestern Texas. It was drier than normal as well across parts of interior North Carolina, much of Virginia, pretty much all of Maryland, as well as parts of Long Island up to Boston. Center here shows January of 2022 precip anomalies. I remember this one well because here in southeastern Virginia we got back-to-back weekend snowstorms. In fact, this was the last time it snowed in a La Nina winter, believe it or not, for southeastern Virginia. But we got back-to-back snowstorms the last 2 weekends of January, and you kind of see that green shading the above normal precip because, and that basically reflects that above normal snowfall, those two back-to-back storms. A lot of the U.S., though, was brown, wasn't it, in January 2022? California was brown, so drier than normal there. Texas, you were drier than normal. Illinois, right up to lower Michigan. Wisconsin and Minnesota, drier than normal. South Dakota, drier than normal. Eastern Montana, drier than normal. Over here on the right is, this is February 2022. Wetter than normal conditions in the Ohio Valley, then drier than normal from southern Virginia southward right along the coast, the southeastern coast down to Florida. Still very much below normal precip across California in February 2022, as well as Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, southern Wisconsin, Minnesota, and South Dakota. Here is the winter 21-22 snowfall totals. We almost got a foot of snow here in southeastern Virginia that winter. I mean, and I think that was a La Nina winter where we normally don't get a lot of snow. That was pretty impressive, those back-to-back weekend storms in January. But you kind of see where the snow fell, the southern extent of where there was measurable snow this particular winter. And you see a lot of the heavier snow in Maine again and the higher elevations, downwind of some of the lakes, the Great Lakes there, Erie and Ontario, as well as up here downwind of the lake of that Superior there, Lake Superior. All right, I believe this is the last year I examined. This is July, August, September 2022 precip anomalies. This is a week La Nina. Here's July 22 on the left. Dry in Texas, dry in interior portions of the western U.S., eastern Oregon, Idaho, parts of Wyoming, western Wyoming, dry in the major areas of New England here, Pennsylvania, Long Island, up to, this is Massachusetts here. Wetter than normal across the Tennessee Valley here, eastern Tennessee and eastern Kentucky specifically, in July of 2022. Here's September 22 in the center, showing you much drier than normal conditions across Nebraska, into Kansas, into parts of Oklahoma. Also very dry or below normal in the Pacific Northwest. It was wetter than normal in the interior portions of the West, eastern Nevada as an example, and even in parts of southwestern Arizona. Above normal precip across parts of southern Mississippi into northern Louisiana and northeastern Texas. Drier than normal generally from coastal Virginia northeastward up to Boston. And over here on the right is September 2022. Look how dry things were in the central U.S. That expanded a bit east to the Virginia coastline. Really, Florida was above normal in precip in September 22, as well as parts of California, as well as slightly above normal precip in New England. Here was the following winter precip anomalies. This is December 2022 on the left, showing above normal precip in central California, extending northeastward to Nevada. We saw above normal precip also across the Dakotas, into parts of western Minnesota, and parts of eastern Montana. And then we also saw like drier than normal conditions across western Kansas, Texas Panhandle, western portions of Texas, as well as Florida, southern Alabama, Georgia, and up in the coastal portions of the Carolinas. And it was also drier than normal in December 2022 for lower Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Over here in the center this would be January of 2023. We see a lot of precip occurring across the central U.S., in this case, from eastern Colorado, Nevada area, Utah, extending northeastward towards Nebraska. Drier than normal month in Florida, drier than normal in West Texas, drier than normal up in North Dakota, and drier than normal across much of the Pacific Northwest in January of 23. And then finally, February 23 on the right. Look how dry things were in the Pacific Northwest, and very dry there in New England, and dry into central Florida, including you and Orlando, and then dry also along southern Texas out towards eastern New Mexico and the Texas Panhandle. Here's the total snowfall for the winter of 22-23. Just generally showing you again where the heaviest snows are to the north. Those of you in the Dakota, North Dakota, eastward in northern Minnesota, and northern Wisconsin, the UP and Michigan, they're off Lake Superior as well as lower Michigan. A lot of the purples out here out west again are on the higher elevation, the Rockies, the Rocky Mountain area. And then here is finally my summary, everybody. Thanks for bearing with me on all the data. Thanks also for bearing with me for my issues here I'm trying to work through as far as my throat, just getting some nastiness occasionally. But all right, so this is what I did. I examined 13 total July, August, September La Nina period precip anomalies. And then the following winter, December, January, and February precip anomalies. We looked at all that data already. Here's my conclusion or my findings. We saw 9 total weak La Nina periods, 4 moderate La Nina periods. So that basically comprises the 13 total. Late summer precip anomalies may have been due, and I mentioned this already. You know, late summer, August, September, the Gulf Coast, all the way up the East Coast, you may have some above normal precip anomalies, but that's really due to tropical cyclone activity. That really is more of a function of tropics more than anything. Now, let's focus on what happened overall. So for July, we saw 2 Julys that were wetter than normal when La Nina was in place. We saw 5 drier than normal Julys, and we saw 6 near average precipitation Julys. Okay. For August, we saw 5 wetter than normal Augusts, 5 drier than normal Augusts, and we had 3 near average precipitation Augusts. And then September's, we saw 5 wetter than normal, 7 drier than normal, and 1 near average. Again, this time of year here, when we're talking about the onset of La Nina, again, you have to look at, okay, where is my tropical cyclone activity? It's a big function of who's wetter or drier than normal for the Gulf Coast to the Mid-Atlantic. All right, now, let's look at the following winters. In December's, we only had 1 wetter than normal December. La Nina began in the July, August, September time period. It lasted through the winter. And during La Nina, in December, we only saw, of the 13 cases, we only had 1 wetter than normal December. My last video, I talked about it being colder than normal for the Mid-Atlantic. And by the way, this is the Mid-Atlantic, okay? I got it up here at the top of the slide. I'm only examining the Mid-Atlantic at this point. So this is where I'm getting the facts from, okay? So Mid-Atlantics in December's during La Ninas tend to be colder. The odds are for slightly colder December's, 54% of the time. And they also tend to be very dry. 9 drier than normal December's during La Ninas. 9 of the 13 were drier than normal. That's 69% of this sample size of the 13 total La Ninas. 9 of 13 drier than normal December's. Only have 3 near average, and I guess that only 1 wetter than normal December. In January, we saw 5 wetter than normal Januaries during La Nina. We saw 7 drier than normal Januaries, and we had 1 near average. So, I mean, January is closer. I mean, it is wetter out of all 3 winter months. You have La Nina coming on in July, August, and September. Then the winter that follows. January, 5 wetter than normal January, 7 drier. You're almost at 50% here. You're slightly skewed to a higher probability of drier than normal Januaries, but it's not a huge disparity, right? In February's, we had 3 that were wetter than normal and 6 drier than normal, 4 near average. So in the February's, okay, with La Nina, we saw 6 of those 13 Februaries were drier than normal. It's 46% of the sample. All right, so what does this tell us? Okay, what is this telling us then? Let's examine this. Okay. December's for the Mid-Atlantic tend to be colder and drier than normal. January is just almost like a 50-50 shot of wetter or drier than normal. And then February's tend to be drier than normal. I mean, it's a 2-to-1 ratio here, 6-to-3. Drier than normal February's. We also said how February's tend to be very warm for my last video during La Ninas for the Mid-Atlantic. So, what's your winter like typically in La Nina then? Just based on La Nina alone. I'm not looking at any other teleconnections, okay? Just La Nina. December's, again, colder and drier than normal. January's, equal probability of wet versus dry, warm versus cold. It's kind of 50-50. But then February's are warmer and drier than normal. Colder and drier, 50-50 January, and warmer and drier than normal in February's for La Ninas. During some other facts here. During moderate La Nina events in the preceding July, August, September time period, 3 of the 4 Decembers were drier than normal, with the other Decembers featuring near normal precip. So if we just looked at the moderate La Nina events, okay, just the 4 moderate La Nina events over the 13 La Nina periods, 3 of the 4 Decembers were drier than normal. So that's 75% when we had moderate La Nina. And then the other Decembers featured near normal precip. Okay. 2 of the 4 January periods featured above normal precip. So I would say that if you live in the Mid-Atlantic, your best odds of getting wintry precip, or any kind of above normal precip for that matter, is going to occur in January. All right, there was only one wetter than normal December. I mentioned this already, and that occurred when there was a weak La Nina in the preceding July, August, September timeframe. It appears that January is more of a wild card, with this month being the wettest during La Nina conditions. So 5 wetter than normal, 7 drier than normal. Again, that's more of a wild card. It's almost a 50-50 shot, wetter or drier than normal. But December turns out from my findings, December is the driest month of the 3 winter months during La Nina for the Mid-Atlantic. All right, and I do have this ready to go, everybody. And I'm so excited. In my next video, I will look at La Nina and hurricane season activity across the North Atlantic. Yes, I will, and I've got that ready to go. I found some really interesting data. Of course, we all know that La Nina generally tends to promote more favorable conditions for increased hurricane activity in the Atlantic. But I broke down some interesting statistics and some of those tropical weather facts that you might be interested in learning. All right, I want to say thank you to everybody, okay? From the bottom of my heart, before I conclude this video, thank you so much for subscribing to the Spot on Weather YouTube channel. Look, I am very happy. I can see that the last video I did on the La Nina and the following winter temperature anomalies for the U.S., I could see that was a big hit. And I appreciate everybody. I like to talk a lot. I'm very detail oriented, okay? I'm not one of these people that get on YouTube on this channel and just rattle off something in 5 minutes. I don't make Instagram reels, okay? I believe in giving you the most thorough knowledge possible. And that's always been my philosophy. Trying to explain things in easy to understand terms for those of you that don't have much of a background in weather. And just really, really delving deep and more thoroughly into the data. I think that's really where we learn the most, is when we take our time, really examine the data, and I just love to share it with you. So look, I saw how many video views there were in the last one I did, La Nina summers and the following winter temp anomalies, and I am just tickled to death on that. And I appreciate it, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed this video just as much. I mean, it's some good data. And I'm very excited. I've got a couple things here coming up here on the channel. The first thing will be the La Nina and the North Atlantic hurricane seasons. I can't wait to share that with you. I don't know if my voice is going to hold out tonight to do it. So that's probably going to have to be a different day. But I have it ready to go. And then the other thing I can't wait to share with you is continued videos explaining the weather, okay? My training video series of the summer. I try to do these during the summertime. I believe in a couple things in summer. I believe you can never learn enough, okay? You always should have the mindset of wanting to learn more and more. And the summertime is when I take that time to really look at other people's research, other people's case studies. And then I kind of brush up my knowledge in the summer on the topic. And then I also like to share the training with you on this video channel, on the Spot on Weather YouTube channel. So I love it. Anyway, I can ramble on all night. Thank you so much for subscribing again. Thank you so much for taking the time to view these videos. I know they're lengthy, but I certainly hope you get something out of them. All right, that's all I got for now. Until next time, take care and God bless everyone.